this will be filming off of here, right?
During the Centennial celebration of the First Presbyterian Church in Clarksville, Tennessee, there was a museum set up in Fellowship Hall showing some of the memorabilia that was in effect in the time of the building of this particular sanctuary 100 years ago. All of the items that were in the museum during the celebration during May 1978 were furnished by members and friends of the First Presbyterian Church in Clarksville, Tennessee. We'll be walking through the museum. At this time, we will raise the camera and give you an overall view, including the original children's bench used in Fellowship Hall at the time of the building of the church. We will see a pre-Civil War suit, white suit. And a petticoat. We'll come over here and see a very beautiful handmade quilt and fan, coffee grinder and bell. Right in front of us is a candlestick and a basket, a wicker basket. Lining the floor are some handmade rugs, throw rugs, and toys of that era. And a shawl. And some early tintype portraits. Back to the toys. Kerosene lamp, wash stand and basin, and a derby hat box. Another lamp and some children's clothing. Okay, in the second part of the museum, we're first looking at a flag commemorating the men who served and died during World War II from the First Presbyterian Church. On around the wall, we see a map of Montgomery County as it was in 1877. Which pretty well depicts the layout of the voting districts as it was when this sanctuary was built 100 years ago. In the second part of the museum, we see another deacon's bench. Give a panorama view of the museum. Here we see quite a few of the pictures, session minute books, communion filler, pictures of the choir, pictures of the church as it was originally built and as the sanctuary stood 100 years ago after the completion of the second building. Some more underclothing of that era, and a wedding coat worn by Miss Elder in 1891 when married in this church. On the wall right in front of us is when we celebrated our sesquicentennial celebration of the congregation in 1972, showing the coat of arms and some of the newspaper articles pertaining to that celebration. On table 2, we will see several things of interest. We were reflecting some of the pictures of the Civil War. Books and clocks and other personal pieces that have been brought by the congregations and friend of the congregation of First Presbyterian Church to celebrate the 100th year of the sanctuary building. Even we see an annual of Southwestern College as it was in 1908. Here are some pictures of Clarksville. As it appeared back at that time, at the turn of the century. Some of the pictures along the Cumberland River. And pictures of the university or the college as it was when Southwestern was here in Clarksville. Some very pretty fans. Typically used before there was air conditioning. This alms box, which has stood or hung in the vestibule outside the sanctuary and is still used there today, has on it, "For the Poor." Okay. Here are some pictures that are in the museum covering the flood of 38, is that right? 37?
Earlier.
James Eldon Thomas and Randall Zepp are technicians helping in the recording of this event for history. Here are some photographs of early Clarksville. Here is Idaho Springs Hotel and Dunbar Cave. And now we're panning some pictures of the Cumberland River as seen about the turn of the century. The cameraman is Chuck Elliott. Click it again. Here are some more pictures along the Cumberland showing what was then the new bridge across the Cumberland dedicated to John T. Cunningham. Here is the Red River covered bridge that used to exist across Red River, and also it shows the picture of the new bridge built. In addition to that, we see the construction of the then Tennessee Railroad trestle along Front Street. And here are some other photographs of Clarksville, including the Presbyterian Church and Castle building at Southwestern University. Our last shots now will cover the second table in room 2 of the museum, covering the some of the papers, including the Clarksville Weekly Chronicle, some of the other items and utensils used back at the turn of the century. And here we are seeing Uli Wilson as a young man, still an active member of this church in 1978, along with some notes and bonds, other gear that are used by men and women, even including an original bill of sale of a Negro slave girl dated 1848. Here's an invitation, hand-drawn, of the church before any of the additions were added to the building.
Melissa Martin Elder, substitute organic grandmother of Melissa Gracey, Miss Donald Gracey. Miss Martin W. Elder, a daughter of Finley Elder Gracey.
This is a hat and cane belonging to Martin W. Elder. And there's a very valuable piece of yellow poplar, more than 150 years old. Some spectacles,
Derby
weight and
hat.
measure, a derby hat, an autographed book, and some spectacles belonging to Evelyn Glenn. And one of the very oddity things on the very end of the table is the Biddy lamp from the old slave quarters of
Really appreciative of this fine turnout and the money we have made for our work camp from this venture. We do appreciate your support. It's been very generous. There are a couple of announcements that I would like to make regarding our program before it begins. First of all, I would like to say that there have been some changes in the cast that you might like to take note of in your programs. First of all, Anna Catherine Atkinson will be the substitute for Edith Hudson in our cast. And secondly, Jim Holm will be the substitute for Bill Wheeler in our cast this afternoon. There is one other remark that I would like to make personally, and that is that there is one name that does not appear nearly enough in this program because of the extreme, diligent efforts she has put forth on this fiasco, shall we say. I noticed her name did appear once, and that was as a typist. And that certainly is not near enough credit for her, because she is not only the typist, she has coordinated the cast, recruited the cast, she wrote the script, she wrote the history that all of you, or many of you, have read of this church, which is a very fine history of our church. Maybe it'll be published someday, I hope. But anyway, without mentioning any more laurels, and there are many more that I could mention, there is one person that I want to stand up so that we can applaud her for all her very, very diligent efforts, and that's Sue Worsham.
Gary's very nice to give me all those laurels, but nothing like this is ever done by one person. If you'll just glance at your playbill, you will see the numbers of people that have helped us, that have put in untold hours, particularly on the artwork. I had the fun part. They had the work part. And I think George and Gary are both to be commended for thinking the thing up and following through, and I'd like to thank everyone who has helped. Thank you.
Having really no further announcements, unless there are some that the audience would like to make. Are there any announcements that need to be made? Seeing no hands, we'll proceed then with our program entitled Voices from the Past.
Before we start the real birthday party, we have another real birthday party to get out of the way. I understand that Gary Reed, pardon me, while I'm trying to remember. Gary Reed is 25 years old today, and no longer eligible, but still handsome, still smart, still intelligent, and deserves to have a very happy birthday. And what I'd like to do then, Mrs. Wright, if you would, is give me key. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Carrie. Happy birthday to you. We're actually here to celebrate not only Gary Reed's birthday, but another birthday, an 100-year birthday party for a building. Now, it's not every building that gets a 100-year birthday party, but this building is special. It's very special to us, to the town, and to those who have preceded us. In our program today, Voices of the Past, we hope to create for you an image and illusion that you have been there and that you are there during this 100 years, so that the events that made this church special will become events that make it special for you.
The people whose voices you will hear recreated were real people. Their names have not been changed. They actually existed. They worshiped and worked in our church. Now, we may have taken a few liberties with the timing and the wording, but these things really happened, and it is all historically true.
As you probably know, this is the second building to be built on this site and to stand here. Where do you think we should begin our recital of the events leading up to this building's construction?
As the Good Witch in The Wizard of Oz said, the best place to begin is at the beginning. And so it was when an itinerant evangelist by the name of, if you can believe this, Gideon Blackburn, rode into town and with his golden tongue oratory gathered together a band of early settlers, naturally of Calvinist faith, and persuaded them that they wanted to organize a church.
As I understand it, organization was not really his cup of tea.
No, it wasn't. And for that little job, he sent all the way to the Synod of Connecticut for a real bona fide missionary by the name of Lyman Whitney. But let's let one of our voices from the past who was really there tell us about it. I call forth Lucinda Elder.
I'm Lucinda Elder. Some people call me Widow Elder, but they won't for long because I'm going to marry Count Reynolds. They say the Presbyterian Church isn't going to have any women elders for another 150 years, but that isn't so. I'm an elder, and I'm a woman, and I'm a woman elder. So I'm in the Presbyterian Church now. I've heard Brother Blackburn preach. I've heard him many a time. He's a good preacher and a fine man, not like that Mr. Whitney. Oh, Mr. Whitney's all right. But he came down here from Connecticut. And you know, he isn't used to the ways of the people down here in the frontier. We were out there in May 1822 at Tompkins Grove. And Mr. Whitney did help us get organized into a church. Well, I was there, and Jane Carnes, and Sally Carnes, and let me see. Oh, yeah, Mary Cook was there, and Duncan Galbraith, and John Hinton, and John Henderson, and Jane Pettis, and John McCarroll, and Catherine Patillo. There were 14 of us, and we really did appreciate what Mr. Whitney did to get us organized. We called ourselves the Presbyterian Church, and we met in their homes for a long time. It worked pretty good at first, but then we got to where we just decided we needed to build us a building. And we talked about it and decided that as long as we were about building, that we ought to include a place for the children. We had lots of people in our town now. There were 40 white families and more coming in all the time. And if we were going to build our building, we wanted to have a little school for the children so they could learn their reading and writing and ciphering. And so we didn't have too hard times then in our town, but we didn't have much cash money. Now, I don't want to brag, but I was the richest person in town. Thanks to my nice husband, God bless his soul. He left me all that land, and I just told him, well, I'd give them the land to build the building on, and they could gather up the cash money for the building. So that's what we did, and when we got all the money together, we built us a beautiful church. It was white, and it had 5 white columns around across the front. And it had a steeple with a real bell in it. And inside, we had real pews that were made out of walnut. And we had a melodeon for our singing. Well, we were so proud of it that we got the photographer to take pictures of it. And we thought that'd be nice to have to hand down to the generations to come. So they took the pictures, and we hope that when they have a museum later on in the church, they'll use that picture and let the people see what our little church looked like. It really was pretty. But by the time they got through with it, they'd already built a schoolhouse for the boys. So we just made a little school for the girls down in the basement. Oh, our church was a grand thing in those days.
Mrs. Elder actually did a great deal for the church, did she not?
Yes, she did. And later on, she gave more land where our educational building is now. And besides that, she founded a long line of faithful church workers. We still have 2 of her descendants in our church today, Miss Sarah Helm Elder and Mrs. Finley Elder Gracey. Finley, would you please stand?
Why did the congregation decide to build a new church when the old one was only a little more than 50 years old?
Well, for one thing, when the federal troops used the basement of the church briefly for a hospital after the Battle of Dover, they did some damage, and then the church was closed for 3 years after that. But mainly it was because the town and the congregation was entering the golden age of elegance, and it simply was not elegant enough for us.
How about another voice of the past to describe how it came about? I call forth the Reverend Dr. Lupton.
I'm J.W. Lupton, Doctor of Divinity. I came here in 1871 from Leesburg, Virginia. When I came here, our flock was saddened. We just suffered through that awful war of brother against brother. We'd even lost two of our own members, two elders, as a matter of fact. Not to say that we hadn't been going through some hard times. We were even suffering through a mild depression. But by 1875, you couldn't tell it by the looks of our town. We had brand new shops. You can look about you and see them. Fine buildings. We had people with fine homes, nice pretty green lawns. We had steamboats and barges going up and down our river again. And soon we would have trolley cars to bring us to church, to bring us to town, to take us out to the college, which we still have today, and even on picnics. Yes, Clarksville was looking up. But our little church was looking a little dowdy now. Its paint was chipping. Columns were beginning to crumble. It was just getting plain too small. The organ was beginning to not even play real good on Sundays. Play a little, maybe, maybe not. And besides, our Episcopal brethren right up the street have torn their building down, and the Methodists are showing symptoms of doing the same thing. Now I ask you, can we Presbyterians not build us a newer, grander place of worship? So I asked the elders, and it came to pass that they agreed, believe it or not. So they have asked the deacons to put out a subscription for $20,000. Well, being Presbyterians, we like just a little bit more. So 2 more subscriptions were put out, and for $35,000, or just a little bit over, we built this grand, magnificent edifice we're here in today. It's a fine building it was, modeled after an old church in Edinburgh, Scotland, built of hand-pressed brick and stone, the fine vaulted ceiling held up by the strong buttresses in the outside walls. And that beautiful bell you hear ringing each Sunday morning, it was given by one of our fine members. And the beautiful stained glass windows you look out of each Sunday, they were also given by many of our members. May God bless them all.
The building was finished all right, but before it could be used, it needed the proverbial woman's touch.
Oh, why so?
Well, for one thing, you can't sit on stained glass windows. And pews were just part of the other furnishings they needed. And so the women raised almost as much money as the church cost.
I suppose we can conjure up another voice out of the past to tell us how this was all accomplished.
You are so right. I call forth Sarah Wilcox.
I'm Sarah Wilcox. I'm a very respectable matron now, as you can plainly see. But when I was a giddy young girl, I got in trouble with the session. Now, you see, it was all because of that old Anna B. Cooper. Her father was out on a birthing call one night, and she decided to get up a dancing party. Well, I told Anna B. if we got caught, we'd surely have a price to pay. But Anna B. had the dancing party anyway. And I went, and we got caught. Well, the session called us up before them. Anna B., me, and poor old Dr. Cooper. It was terrible. All of those old men that were the elders, and they said some horrible things to us and about us. I just broke down and cried and promised them that I'd never do that again. Dr. Cooper was sorry too. But you know, Anna B., she wasn't sorry the least bit. And so they kicked her out of the church. And she didn't even care. Well, when good Dr. Lupton came to the church and wanted to build the new building, I decided then and there that I would do all I could to make up for all of that horrible thing that I had done in the past. So it took a lot of work, and raising the money wasn't easy. But the men got the money together, and when the building was completed, they were able to pay the building off, and there wasn't a single penny's worth of debt on it. But there wasn't any furniture either. There was no organ, no communion table, no pews, no nothing. Oh, well, there were a few pews left over from the last smaller church, but we needed a whole lot more. So we women put our heads together and started working on money-making projects. We had bazaars and made handmade goods like maids' aprons and doilies, cup towels, and tea cozies. And we had bake sales and rummage sales, ice cream suppers, and even silver teas. And then every now and then we'd dip down into our household allowance and take a little bit from it and add it to the fund. So when Dr. Cowell designed the organ, we were able to pay the $3,500 that it cost.
I presume this Dr. Caldwell was the organist.
Yes, he was at that time.
Did he really design the organ?
Yes, he did. And when we had some work done on it, had it rebuilt a few years ago, the firm that did the work said that it had a very special tonal quality. They urged us never to sell the organ, but to have it rebuilt because of this beautiful sound that it had. And actually, it would have cost less to buy a new organ than it did to have it rebuilt, but this has a certain historical value for us.
Well, it must be a very fine instrument. Let's hear what the good organist himself has to say about it. I call forth Dr. J.W. Caldwell.
My name is Dr. J.W. Caldwell. I'm the professor of music over here at the college. I played organ in this church for many years, ever since the first organ replaced the old worn-out melodeon. Now, a building this size requires a special sound from its organ. Even though we use a choir, the Presbyterian folk are not always known to give a joyful noise. They need all the help they can get. Now, I designed this organ so the sound would come up and out into the whole room. In fact, you can hear the organ in the balcony just as clear as you can on the front row. Of course, an instrument so big with so many pipes, there's 21 pipes that show, and then there's more behind the gilded ones, takes a special kind of motor. Well, a water-driven motor seemed to be the most efficient, and it also produced the exact sound that I wanted from that organ. But the trouble was, I didn't anticipate all the troubles my neighbors was going to have. I didn't realize there would not be enough water pressure. You see, all the neighbors in the neighborhood had put in indoor plumbing into their fine home. And every time I played the organ, well, the neighbors, they just couldn't flush. And this caused quite a commotion. So after a couple of years of heated arguments here, I resigned and went on to bigger and better things. I did understand that they had to replace the water-driven motor with a hand bellows pump type. But that worked out pretty good too, because they used the little boys in the service to hand pump these bellows, and that kept them out of trouble during the service.
You know, I can't believe they actually used small boys to pump the bellows.
Indeed they did. And would you believe that in our congregation today there is still one of those small boys that pumped the organ? Uli Wilson. I wish he were here so he could tell you about it. But he is the one that pumped the organ for his father, who was the organist. Of course, that was at a much later time.
Well, this certainly has been interesting and informative. Do you have any more voices out of the past?
I surely do, and this one you aren't going to believe.
Oh, I could hardly wait.
I call forth Addie Wilson.
I am Addie Wilson, Miss Addie Wilson, and I've come to exhort you, no rebuke you, you sinful sons and daughters of Sodom and Gomorrah. Your conduct is most unbecoming. You take the name of the Lord in vain with your vulgar and profane language. You even engage in the sinful pastime of dancing and playing with spotted cards and even going to the opera and the theater. Shame. And your mouths are unbridled. You chatter and gossip in the vestibule, and you still do. And after the holy worship service, you talk and chatter and gossip, and your voices go all the way up to the top of this beautiful church. Shame on every one of you. But I will have no part of it. You will pay the price because you have sinned. But as for me, I am going to the heathen islands of Japan and spread the gospel to every creature, as our Lord told us to do. And she did.
Well, you were certainly right. I didn't believe it.
Well, it happened. It was a little later in time, but it actually happened. In fact, it happened twice. Once, she stood up in the pews and berated the congregation, and another time, she slipped up these back stairs into the pulpit behind the minister just as he was finishing his sermon.
That must have been something.
It was, and she was weird. And we have a person here today who saw it all. It happened to her father, who was the minister at that time, Miss Margaret Lacey. Will Miss Margaret please stand?
I think that about wraps up things for this afternoon. We hope we have succeeded in making you feel that you have stepped back in time just for a little while. Alice, do you have anything else to say?
Just this, Jim. It takes a lot of people to put on a birthday celebration like this. But it takes a lot more people to make a church a church. And all through the years, more than 150 now, we have had a lot of people putting on a lot of things and doing a lot of work. We've always had a lot going for us, but the best of all we have had is our people. Good night. Good day, Jim.
Good afternoon, Alice, and good afternoon to all of you, too.
Let's give them another hand. Oh yes, and a very important part of our program today, Miss Elizabeth Wright. Thank you, Elizabeth. One thing that needs to be said before you all disperse, went to the trouble and the pleasure, we hope, of dressing up to please step out with the cast here so that we can all get you on videotape. We would like that for our record, so if you would please do that, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone who would like to see our museum too, it will remain open for a little while.
I guess Harry left, didn't he? He's gone. Harry's gone. He's going to take our picture. We're close.
Show it right off the front. That's good.
You let me know when you get to.
Okay, I'll turn it off too.
Look out. Just make yourself famous.
So much faster.
That's good.
A real good show.
Got it?
That's not you. Got
And what I don't have, I would like you just to walk over there with me. Okay.
Without my feather hat.
Where's your feather
My
hat?
feather hat's upstairs.
Well, you go get it because if you were one of them,
That's good.
I'd like to have you in one.
Got it.
Turn it off. Okay, let us sit down on the table.
You can't cut on. You can't cut on, do you?
Bring it back up and watch. Show us what There we go.
Cut off. Got it.
This is Patch's Foundry, and what we have been surveying has been the storefront buildings that were built in the Fellowship Hall of First Presbyterian Church to celebrate the 100th
anniversary of the church.
And right there is Finley Elder Gracey. We have got you on television, Gracey. Yes, ma'am. I am George Gracey, pastor of the First Presbyterian Church, 1978. The celebration which we had on this occasion was a good one. Let me tell you some of the people involved. The overall committee for our anniversary celebration of the sanctuary consisted of Sue Worsham, Elizabeth Badley, and Ruby Jean McLeod. The storefronts, simulating 1878 Clarksville storefronts, were drawn by Mike Youngflesh, who did Hodgson Millinery and Dress Shop, Joan Jenkins, Patch's Foundry, Nancy Russell drew the Elder Opera House, Susan Elliott and Joan Jenkins drew the Weekly Grocery Store, Susan Porter drew the Owen and Moore Apothecary. The people involved in the drama were Jim Holm and Alice Connell as interviewers. Lucinda Elder was played by Virginia Zepp. The Reverend Dr. J.W. Lupton by Bruce Baggett.
Sarah Wilcox by Anna Catherine Atkinson, Dr. J.W. Caldwell by Tom Shelley, and Addie Wilson by B. Clark. 1878, the year of this sanctuary's dedication, was an interesting year. Internationally, it was the year when Russia and Turkey signed the Treaty of Berlin, a treaty which was significant not only because it brought to a conclusion that war, but because it was the last international gathering of nations on a worldwide scale which was to exclude the United States of America. The United States at that time was an emerging new power in the Western Hemisphere. In these United States, 1878 was an interesting year. It was a year between two major inventions. Just 2 years earlier, Alexander Graham Bell had invented the telephone, and just 2 years later, Thomas Edison had invented the electric light bulb. It was a year during a period of railroad expansion. The number of railroad track miles was increased between the years of 1865 and 1900 from 35,000 miles of track to 200,000 miles of railroad track. It was a year of dispute. Farmers disputed with the railroad management over the cost of sending their products to market. It was a year of dispute between labor and management. Locally, the year 1878 was a year which has long been and will long be remembered in Clarksville for the Great Fire. On Saturday night, April 13, 1878, a fire began which was to consume 15 acres of commercial buildings and private homes. It was a grand conflagration that brought disaster and destruction to the heart of Clarksville. 1878 was the year of this sanctuary's dedication, and life in the Presbyterian Church went on as usual. Life which consisted of dealing with people who were struggling with the problems we struggle with today. Sessions trying to find people to take responsibilities in the church. It was the year of this sanctuary's dedication, the big event of 1878. And our founding fathers, in building this building, have actually given to us a sermon in concrete and stone, in beauty and design, and in the furnishings of the building. In typical Presbyterian fashion, let me simply lift out 3 points which are preached in the sermon of this building. Point number 1, the quality of work which has gone into this structure. Look around you. Look at the quality of the design. Look at the quality of the materials. Look at the quality of the craftsmanship that has gone into the woodwork. Look at the quality that is in the stained glass windows. Everywhere you look, you see material, design, structure of the finest quality. The people of 1878 were saying in that sermon to every generation which would follow that while they, as every generation, cannot see or foresee what the future holds, one can best face that future if it is faced by putting into life quality. Jesus told a parable about people who built houses on sand, only to see the sand erode away and the house fall. In contrast to that, there was the man who built on the rock. Jesus is saying that if you're building a life, one must build that life on quality, on the rock, on that which is solid. If you're building churches, if you're building homes, if you're building lives, invest in them all the best quality that one can. The second point, which seems to be written into the design and structure of our sanctuary, is the centrality of God. As one approaches the building from blocks, perhaps even miles away, one can see the towering steeple that stretches from the foundation right on the corner of 3rd and Main Street, pointing upward to the heavens. It is a symbolic indication of the centrality of God in the midst of life. As one enters the sanctuary, one is immediately impressed by the high vaulted ceiling, by the grandeur and majesty of the sanctuary, which directs all of our attention to the grandeur and greatness of God. As one takes one's seat in the sanctuary, one's attention is focused on the pulpit, which is center and in front. And on that pulpit is the open Bible, symbolizing the centrality of the Word of God in the midst of worship. All of this is designed and structured and furnished in order to call the attention of the worshiper from the moment he approaches the sanctuary to the moment he leaves the sanctuary, to the need for the centrality of God in the presence of worship and in all of life. The third point that is written into the building by its design is partly in the furnishings of the building. And if one will direct his or her attention to the communion table in front, one will observe also that below the pulpit and the open Bible symbolizing the centrality of God is the communion table symbolizing the centrality of the Christian community. Communion with God, communion with each other in the context of the Christian church. In this, our fathers were saying to us by their design that whether the future will be good or bad, whether it holds for one prosperity or poverty, whether it holds for one joy or sorrow, or all of these, one can face that future best as a part of a Christian community, a caring people, a supporting fellowship. When one faces hardship, one faces that hardship best in community, with the support of Christian friends. As one faces joy, what better way to celebrate a joy or make a joy more significant than by sharing it with people we know and love? Yes, our founding fathers said to us by placing the communion table at the center of the sanctuary that community is essential to our life as individuals and as a Christian community. It was written into one of the hymns which we often sing in the church, with which hymn we shall close this worship service. Blessed be the tie that binds our hearts in Christian love. The fellowship of kindred minds is like to that above. The woes our mutual burdens bear, and often for each other flows the sympathizing tear.